I got pregnant with a friend with benefits. We used birth control, but he chose to opt out of wearing a condom. He knew my stance of not getting pregnant, and I knew he didn't want a baby. We were both dumb with our decision-making, and of course, I ended up pregnant. After I got pregnant, we stayed in touch a bit and still went on a trip we had previously scheduled before I got pregnant. He easily could have canceled, as the reservations were in his name, but he didn't. He told me I didn't need to contribute to the cost. About halfway into the pregnancy, I offered him the option to sign his rights away, but he didn't want to commit to that. We started working on creating an agreement, but it would always end in fighting. He would say he didn't want this. He did not come to the birth and was adamant about being off the birth certificate. After the baby was born, he visited twice, though he lives in another state. He also voluntarily started sending $500 per month. I never asked for this, but I was appreciative. I was adamant about getting this in writing, so there would be accountability. He was always busy or would start a fight to end the conversation, telling me this was my decision to have the baby and he didn't want it. I offered that we could meet with an attorney and split the legal fees, but again, he would procrastinate. Eventually, I was fed up and gave him a deadline before I would take matters into my own hands. When I got an attorney, that burned the bridge with him. He no longer checked on our baby and became hostile. So, we really haven't talked in over 4 months, and he hasn't seen the baby in over 6 months. I just received the proposed agreement made by my attorney. I know he's going to be livid when he sees the child support worksheet, which recommends $1,300 per month. I know he didn't want the baby, but he also made the decision to be involved in the beginning. Now that I've gone to the attorney, he no longer wants to be involved. Am I the jerk for holding him accountable since he decided to be involved and keep the recommended amount? Or should I advocate to stick to what we have been doing, $500 per month? My friends all think I'm dumb for even thinking about lowering his amount, but it would be nice to have some unbiased opinions before moving forward. Maybe I am dumb, but you can tell me that. My feelings won't get hurt. LOL. To add more details, I went through an attorney, which means we had to do a paternity test, and he had to fill out a discovery questionnaire. This was all filed through the courts. He got an attorney after he was served with a paternity test order. This is my attorney's attempt at an out-of-court settlement. I am not familiar with the legal terminology, and I don't need the money. I have a college education, a good-paying job, and a stable life. This isn't a debate about whether or not I should have given the baby up for adoption or engaged in premarital intimacy. Now for an update. Thank you for the suggestions and input, both positive and negative. I will reply back to my lawyer to move forward with the proposed amount. The extra that I don't currently need will be put towards a 529 plan and another high-yield savings account that I can use for the child in the future. This will cover $500 per month for private school tuition, a first car, a down payment for a first house, etc. Now, for a few comments before the update. Comment 1. Are you putting him on child support through the state? Because my understanding is once it's done through the courts, they determine the amount, and you wouldn't be able to lower it even if you wanted to. Although you definitely shouldn't if it's more than you need to support the baby. Then, start a college fund for them with the excess. Comment 2. Not the idiot. He knew your stance on baby uniliving. He chose not to wear a condom, and then he chose to be at least a little involved. There is no undo button. He has a kid now, and that kid is going to have a better life if you are able to afford all the little parts of raising a person, and that is the most important thing. Now, for the update. Hey everyone, thanks for sticking with me through this journey. So, after deciding to move forward with the proposed child support amount of $1,300 per month, things got pretty intense. My lawyer sent the agreement to his lawyer, and as expected, he was furious. He called me up, yelling about how unfair it was and how he never wanted this in the first place. I tried to stay calm and reminded him that he had chosen to be involved initially, but he wasn't having any of it. He threatened to fight the amount in court, which I knew could drag things out even longer and make everything more stressful. In the midst of all this, I got a call from my lawyer. She suggested that we might want to consider mediation as a way to come to an agreement without going to court. I was hesitant at first because I didn't think he would agree to it, but I decided to give it a shot. I reached out to him and proposed the idea, and to my surprise, he agreed. I think he realized that fighting it in court could end up costing him more in legal fees and stress. We scheduled the mediation for the following week. I was nervous but hopeful that we could come to a reasonable agreement. During the mediation, things were tense at first. He was still angry and kept bringing up how he never wanted the baby. I tried to stay focused on what was best for our child and not get drawn into the emotional arguments. The mediator was really helpful in keeping us on track and making sure we both had a chance to speak. After several hours of back and forth, we finally reached an agreement. He would pay $1,000 per month in child support, and we would set up a formal visitation schedule. He would visit once a month and have video calls with our child every week. It wasn't exactly what I wanted, but it was a compromise that I could live with. I felt relieved that we had come to an agreement without having to go to court. The next few weeks were a bit of an adjustment. He started making the payments on time, and we set up the first visitation. It was awkward at first, but I could see that he was trying to make an effort. Our child was a bit shy around him, but they started to warm up to each other by the end of the visit. The video calls were a bit hit or miss at first, but they gradually became more consistent. During this time, I also had to deal with the emotional fallout of everything that had happened. I had been so focused on the legal and financial aspects that I hadn't really processed my own feelings. I realized that I was still angry and hurt by how he had treated me and our child. I decided to start seeing a therapist to help me work through these feelings and figure out how to move forward in a healthy way. One day, during a therapy session, I had a bit of an aha moment. I realized that part of my anger was rooted in my own unresolved issues from my past. Growing up, my dad had been mostly absent, and I had always felt a sense of abandonment. I realized that I was projecting some of those feelings onto my child's father, and that I needed to separate my own issues from the current situation. This realization was a turning point for me and helped me start to let go of some of the anger and focus on what was best for our child. As the months went by, things started to settle into a new normal. The visitation schedule was working out, and our child was starting to build a relationship with their father. I was still putting the extra money into the savings accounts for our child's future, and it felt good to know that I was providing for them in the best way I could. There were still challenges, of course. Co-parenting with someone who didn't want to be a parent in the first place was never going to be easy, but I started to see small signs that he was beginning to care more about our child. He would ask about their milestones and seemed genuinely interested in their well-being. It wasn't a complete turnaround, but it was progress. One day, during one of his visits, he opened up to me about his own fears and insecurities. He admitted that he had been scared of becoming a father and didn't know how to handle it. He said that he was starting to realize that he needed to step up and be there for our child, even if it wasn't what he had planned for his life. It was a vulnerable moment, and it helped me see him in a different light. I realized that he was struggling too, and that we both needed to work together for the sake of our child. Looking back, I can see how far we've come. It hasn't been easy, and there are still challenges ahead, but I feel more hopeful about the future. Our child is growing and thriving, and we're both doing our best to provide a stable and loving environment for them. I know that there will be more bumps in the road, but I feel more equipped to handle them now. Thanks for reading. Am I the idiot for choosing my wife's family over my own and getting disowned for it? I'm 33 years old, and my wife is 30. We've been together for 11 years and have a 3-year-old son. My family is what they themselves call traditional. That means I was spanked as a kid. My dad drinks too much, and my mom is overbearing. My oldest sister was parentified and is very resentful towards the whole family, and my brother is an alcoholic. I cannot have an honest conversation with my parents without my mom overstepping or my dad berating me. My mom hates my wife and my sister's husband just for existing. You get the picture. They're not bad people or anything, and I do love them, but we're not the happy family my mom pretends to be on Facebook. On the other hand, my wife's family is just nice. She's best friends with her siblings, and they're all very close. Over the years, I've become good friends with her sister's husbands too. When we first started dating, I was like, wow, your parents are really good at controlling themselves and not quarreling in front of us during dinner. She was like, it took me some time to really fathom that this is just how they are, and that family relationships like this are possible. Anyways, from the very start, they treated me like a member of the family, and I feel very comfortable and enjoy spending time with them. I used to feel guilty for spending more time with my wife's family than mine. It changed when our kid got seriously sick and nearly died. My wife's family stepped up and did all in their power to help us, without overstepping. Meanwhile, my mom acted like the main character, constantly calling my wife for updates and crying, expecting us to console her, while my dad shut out and drank. I understand everyone reacts to stress differently, but this situation really made me realize what example I want to set for my kid. So, I no longer try to ensure equal time for my parents during holidays. We go to my in-laws because the atmosphere there is good. I make sure to call my parents and visit them, but I no longer drag my wife and kid along, as neither of them enjoys it, and it's not the right example for my son. Now, my birthday is coming up, and we have a trip planned. My mother-in-law will be flying with us and babysitting. I'm really grateful because I was not comfortable leaving our son behind, but we also wouldn't have been able to attend certain events there if not for my mother-in-law's help. My parents wanted to come visit on my birthday, and I had to tell them all about the trip because my mom kept asking. This resulted in my mom disowning me for taking my mother-in-law on a trip when it should be her. I'm treating, however. She's not going there to be treated. She's going there to help. Also, my mom is morbidly obese, among other things, and I wouldn't trust her with a toddler, so I can't take her instead. Honestly, I'd rather not go at all if my mom was going because nobody would be able to have a good time. I did not tell her that. I feel bad about things being the way they are, but I also feel it's not entirely my fault. Am I the jerk for letting it happen? Now, for a few comments before the update. Comment 1. Not the idiot. Your decisions seem to be based on the well-being and comfort of your immediate family, particularly your young son. It's clear that your wife's family provides a healthier and more supportive environment, which is crucial, especially in times of crisis. Your mother's reaction, including disowning you, reinforces your decision to prioritize your wife's family. It's important to create a positive and stable environment for your child, and it seems like you're doing what's best for your family. Comment 2. Not the idiot. You're doing the right thing by minimizing the time that your wife and sons spend with your family. I get along better with my in-laws than my parents. My parents were very young and broke when they had me, which led to a lot of fighting, threats of divorce, and anger issues all around. The older 3 of us kids remember all that. The younger 2, not so much. Now, for the update. Hey everyone, thanks for reading the last post. So, the trip happened, and it was a mix of highs and lows. We flew out last Monday, and my mother-in-law was a lifesaver. She handled our son like a pro, which allowed my wife and me to attend the events we had planned. But things took a turn when we got a call from my brother. He was drunk and ranting about how I was abandoning the family. He said some pretty hurtful things, and it really got to me. I tried to brush it off, but it lingered in the back of my mind. The next day, we were at a family-friendly event when my phone rang again. This time, it was my mom. She was crying and saying she couldn't believe I chose my mother-in-law over her. She accused me of being ungrateful and said I was breaking her heart. I tried to explain that it wasn't about choosing sides, but she wouldn't listen. She hung up on me, and I felt a mix of anger and sadness. Later that evening, my wife and I had a long talk. She reminded me that we made this decision for our son's well-being and our own sanity. She also pointed out that my mom's reaction was exactly why we didn't want her on the trip. It was a tough pill to swallow, but I knew she was right. We decided to focus on enjoying the rest of the trip and deal with the fallout when we got back. When we returned home, things were tense. My mom had left several voicemails, each more emotional than the last. My dad hadn't called at all, which was almost worse. I knew I had to face them, so I went over to their house alone. My mom was still upset but calmer. My dad, however, was distant and cold. He barely looked at me and only spoke to criticize my decisions. It was clear that this wasn't going to be resolved easily. In the days that followed, I noticed a change in myself. I was more irritable and short-tempered, especially with my wife and son. I realized that the stress from my family was affecting my own family life. I didn't want to be that kind of husband or father, so I decided to take a step back from my parents for a while. I told them I needed some space to focus on my own family. My mom was hurt, but said she understood. My dad just shrugged and walked away. During this time, I also had a heart-to-heart with my sister. She admitted that she felt the same way about our parents, but didn't know how to break free. We talked about our childhood and how it shaped us. She shared stories of how she felt trapped and resentful, and I realized that I had been carrying similar feelings. It was a cathartic conversation and brought us closer. Meanwhile, my wife and I decided to see a therapist to help us navigate this difficult period. It was one of the best decisions we made. The therapist helped us understand our own feelings and how to communicate better. She also gave us strategies to deal with my parents in a healthier way. It wasn't an overnight fix, but it was a step in the right direction. One evening, while putting our son to bed, I had a moment of clarity. I realized that I was repeating patterns from my own childhood. I was letting my parents' behavior dictate my actions and emotions. I didn't want my son to grow up with the same issues. I wanted to break the cycle and create a healthier environment for him. This realization was a turning point for me. I started setting boundaries with my parents. I told them that I loved them but needed to prioritize my own family. My mom was resistant at first, but she eventually came around. My dad remained distant, but I accepted that I couldn't change him. I focused on what I could control and made peace with the rest. As for my brother, he continued to struggle with his alcoholism. I reached out to him and offered my support, but he wasn't ready to accept help. It was heartbreaking, but I knew I couldn't force him to change. I decided to be there for him when he was ready, but I couldn't let his issues drag me down. Throughout all this, my wife's family remained a constant source of support. They never judged me or pressured me to take sides. They simply offered love and understanding, which was exactly what I needed. It made me appreciate them even more and reinforced my decision to spend more time with them. Looking back, the trip was a catalyst for change. It forced me to confront issues I had been avoiding for years. It wasn't easy, and there were moments when I doubted myself, but in the end, it brought me closer to my wife and son and helped me set healthier boundaries with my parents. It also strengthened my relationship with my sister and gave me a new perspective on my own upbringing. Thanks for reading. Am I the idiot for telling my brother's wife to get help after she fat-shamed me? I'm a 27-year-old female, have been married to my husband, a 29-year-old male, for 2 years. He has an ex-wife, Ally, a 29-year-old female, and they have 2 kids together, a boy and a girl. We all get along really well, even if we aren't doing family dinners, etc., like some co-parents do. This story is about my brother's wife, Caitlin, a 19-year-old female. My husband and I recently had twins, a boy and a girl. Sadly, our son didn't make it. It's been a long couple of months with our grief, having my first baby after a rough pregnancy. My brother is in the army, and while he's doing some training, his wife is staying with us because they're moving soon after he's finished. It was fine at first, until Caitlin started making little digs about me. She hasn't lost the baby weight, and if I don't want to stay my size, I should need XYZ, etc. When my stepkids are here, she once remarked that it was good my husband managed to get at least one son. She's careful to only say these things where I can hear them, and no one else. It's gotten to be a lot to take. I've spent a lot of time crying over the things she said to me, on top of still grieving my son. I haven't told anybody what she's been doing, just because I don't have it in me to have one more thing for people to feel bad for me about. Until this past Friday, I kept it all inside. Friday afternoon, Ally dropped the kids off for the weekend. While I was standing there talking to her, I guess I looked really upset. Caitlin had just made another crappy comment, and I ended up telling her everything. I told her the last thing Caitlin had said about my weight before Ally and the kids got there. Unfortunately, for Caitlin at least, Ally has a complete lack of what you would call, give a freck. Caitlin walks into the room, and I'm teary-eyed. Caitlin makes a comment about me being whiny. Ally immediately fires back with a tone I've never heard her use. Being a pick-me which doesn't burn calories. If it did, maybe you wouldn't look like a beluga whale. At first, I was stunned into silence, but before I even realized it, I had started laughing. Caitlin immediately started crying and left the room. Ally went home, and I got a call from my brother telling me I'm terrible because, apparently, Caitlin had an eating disorder in her younger teenage years. He thought I was insensitive to that by laughing at Ally's mean comment. While I tried to explain to him that she's been making nonstop comments towards me, he didn't care and kept trying to call me out on it. He even went so far as to tell our parents, who aren't really taking sides but do think we should both apologize to each other. So, am I the jerk for laughing at what Ally said? Now for a few comments before the update. Comment 1. It was good that my husband managed to get at least one son. Give me a minute. This blinded me with rage so badly that I can barely move on. No, really, I have tears of rage on your behalf right now. How fast she would have been out of my house immediately after that. I'm so sorry that was not okay, and she does not deserve kindness. So whatever I read from this point on, good for you, not the idiot. Okay, deep breath. I'm going to read the rest of what you took the time to write for us. I was insensitive to that by laughing at Allie's mean comment. What goes around comes around. Don't dish it out if you can't take it. Ally is a real one. You should do family dinners with her, not the idiot. Caitlin needs to move out. I'm not over that, and I don't think I'm going to be. Ally needs to move in. Comment to not the idiot. Your relationship with Ally sounds so wholesome. You are being in disservice to yourself and your family by allowing Caitlin to stay. Give her notice to leave already. She's a risk to your mental health and therefore to the health of your family. She should go live with her own parents, your parents, or at a host. Both she and your bro owe you an apology. Escalating the issue to your parents shows a lack of self-knowledge. Did they really think this was going to look good on them? Sorry to hear your parents are being neutral. Now for the update. Thanks for all the comments from the last post. So, a lot has happened since then, and it's been a pretty intense month after that incident with Ally and Caitlin. Things got really awkward around the house. Caitlin started avoiding me, which was a relief at first, but then it just made everything feel tense. My husband noticed the weird vibe and asked me what was going on. I didn't want to drag him into it, but I ended up telling him everything Caitlin had been saying. He was furious and wanted to confront her right away, but I convinced him to let me handle it. A few days later, Caitlin and I had a long talk. I told her how much her comments had hurt me, especially since I was still grieving my son. She seemed genuinely surprised and apologized, saying she didn't realize how much her words were affecting me. She admitted that she was feeling insecure about her own body and was projecting those feelings onto me. It was a bit of a breakthrough, and I thought things might get better. But then my brother came home from training for a weekend visit. He was still upset about the whole situation and wanted to have a family meeting to clear the air. So we all sat down. Me, my husband, Caitlin, and my brother. My brother started by saying that he understood why I was hurt, but felt that Caitlin deserved an apology too. I agreed to apologize for laughing at Allie's comment, but I also wanted Caitlin to apologize for her hurtful remark. Caitlin apologized again, but it felt forced. My brother seemed satisfied, but I could tell Caitlin was still holding on to some resentment. After the meeting, she went back to avoiding me, and the tension in the house returned. One evening, about a week later, my husband and I were having dinner with Ally and the kids. Ally noticed I was still upset and asked what was going on. I told her about the family meeting and how things hadn't really improved. Ally suggested that maybe Caitlin needed some professional help to deal with her insecurities and past eating disorder. She offered to talk to Caitlin herself, but I wasn't sure if that was a good idea. The next day, Ally came over and had a private conversation with Caitlin. I don't know exactly what was said, but Caitlin seemed more subdued afterward. She started spending more time in her room and less time making snide comments. I hoped this was a sign that she was reflecting on her behavior. Then something unexpected happened. My husband found an old journal of Caitlin's while cleaning out the guest room. He showed it to me, and we debated whether or not to read it. In the end, curiosity got the better of us. The journal was from when Caitlin was a teenager and detailed her struggles with her eating disorder and her feelings of inadequacy. It was heartbreaking to read and gave me a new perspective on her behavior. I decided to confront Caitlin about the journal. I told her we had found it and read some of it. She was initially angry and felt violated, but then she broke down in tears. She admitted that she had never fully dealt with her past and that being around me, especially after my pregnancy, had triggered a lot of those old feelings. She said she was sorry for taking it out on me and that she wanted to get help. We had a long talk that night, and for the first time, I felt like we were really connecting. Caitlin agreed to see a therapist, and I offered to help her find one. My husband and I also decided to set some boundaries to make our home a more positive environment for everyone. In the meantime, my brother finished his training and came home for good. He was relieved to see that things were improving between Caitlin and me. We all sat down for another family meeting, and this time, It felt more productive. We talked about how we could support each other better and make sure everyone felt heard and respected. As for Ally, she continued to be a great support system for me. She even offered to babysit more often so my husband and I could have some time to ourselves. Her bluntness and non-nonsense attitude were exactly what I needed to get through this tough time. Looking back, I realized that Caitlin's behavior was a cry for help. She was dealing with her own demons and didn't know how to cope. While her comments were hurtful, they were also a reflection of her own pain. I'm glad we were able to address the underlying issues and start working towards a healthier relationship.